Matt Bettinelli and Tyler Open. This is now a hot new directing team that's been really, really successful in a short amount of time. A few years ago, they kind of had their claim to fame with the film Ready or Not, which put them on a lot of people's radars. And shortly thereafter that, they made two back-to-back Scream films, which were hugely successful, pretty much the most successful Scream films that have been made up until that point. But then they decided to step away after Scream 6 and sort of take on some other projects. And most recently, this one being Abigail, which is technically a remake slash reimagining of Dracula's Daughter, which is one of the original Universal monster horror films that came out in 1936. It was the direct sequel to
Sheesh.
the original Dracula movie with Bela Lugosi. But this movie is quite different, definitely a much, much different reimagining compared to that film. But ultimately, this directing duo has been really successful, and now they're taking on a variety of new projects. I know they have a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline even after this movie, but we got a chance to go check out this movie this past weekend and go check out and see what it was about. So with all of that out the way, man, I will pass it over to you. What did you think about this new vampire horror film, Abigail?
What a fun time in the theater. Abigail. This movie is so interesting because there's so many things about it to like. I don't think it necessarily does almost anything perfect, but it does a lot of things really, really well. That made it just such a fun watch and enjoyable experience. One of them being the cast. Melissa Barrera is becoming one of my favorite final girls. You know what I mean? She's really like one of those. I don't know, man. I don't know if necessarily Scream Queen yet is what I could call her, but it's just really cool to see her leading films like this because she works for it and she makes sense. I think of the grand scheme of a lot of these films. Alicia Ware, of course. I think I sang her praises on the podcast after talking about Matilda the musical. I thought that musical was tremendous. She's tremendous in this. It's funny because I'm betting like she's just a really good dancer as well. And Abigail is supposedly about, again, Dracula's daughter who does do ballet. So I think that might have carried over into this film as well. She probably didn't have to train too much. I think she might be just a good dancer and a good actress overall because I really enjoyed Alicia Ware in this movie as well. Dan Stevens, I thought in a lot of ways kind of started to steal the show. You know what I mean? He had some really, really good and cool moments. I was like, man, we sure this isn't his movie? This feels like it might be Dan Stevens' movie. So I absolutely enjoyed him as well. And then I have to give a shout out to Angus Cloud. Rest in peace. They do a good job um of kind of sending him off. You know, it was one of his last posthumous releases that he has after his death. And what's so interesting is when you're watching the film, Angus Cloud is a part of it, but there's a couple moments that felt like they might have been. I don't know if blooper is the word, but like some footage they weren't going to use before. But after he passed, like they might have decided to keep some of that footage in to make sure he had more screen time. I think I could feel that in the movie too. I'm like, I don't know if that would have been in the movie, but because yeah, it made sense in that way. William Catlett, great. Catherine Newton, last shout out because she's collecting Infinity Stones at this point. I mean, she's Dracula, slasher movies, Frankenstein. Like this girl, she will do anything, and I really like that about her. She's also like becoming one of those cool Loki scream queens that we have today. So I really love that she was in this movie doing something different. I appreciate that. Also, Giancarlo. Enough said. People know we know how we feel about Giancarlo. Amazing. But this movie, man, again, it follows a group of criminals. They kidnap a 12-year-old girl. Turns out to be a vampire. The thing I thought they would spend a little more time on in this film, they're trapped in the house with a vampire, right? But they do this work for you to understand that everybody that's trapped in the house with her has a specialty. And then they don't really do anything with the specialties. That's one thing that was like, I thought we were going to do something with those, and they never really do. It just turns into like the thriller horror, normal horror film without those specialties. I was hoping they would do a little bit of that, but they really don't. And another thing, the last act, it's fun, but it also kind of just like falls off the hinges. I was like, I don't know how we got here, but here we are now with this again. It's a great time, but also like it did take away from, I think, from the story of the movie a little bit. But overall, Abigail is a great time. Again, Alicia Ware does a really good job of playing the vampire. It's gritty, it's dark. I love the tension that they create. There's a couple moments where you can't necessarily see everything that's happening, but you just kind of hear it, and then you see the repercussion, and I think that's terrifying. Like I think they did some really a really good job there with a lot of those effects and things like that, man. But man, this film was really fun for me. I can't wait to see what they do next. They really haven't missed for me yet. Matt Bettinelli and Tyler Gillett, they really haven't missed for me yet. I like Ready or Not. I like the Scream movies, and I like Abigail. So I'm pretty on board with them as directors. I think they have a lot to say. I think they have a cool style to them, and a lot to do, man. But this was just one of those films I think that I wish was on a not that more people knew about, because I think if this whenever this comes on streaming, it's going to go crazy. I really do. I think it's going to do a really good job. So I hope more people continue to go see it in theaters and the box office. But there's a lot going on right now, and I understand. But man, I really enjoyed Abigail for what it was.
So Abigail is a movie for me that it continued to evolve over the course of its runtime, which is probably the aspect that I enjoyed the most about it. That it
Mm,
never stayed one type of movie for the duration of the film. You know, it begins as a more traditional crime thriller, kind of a hostage movie about that group kidnapping this 12-year-old girl, but then it eventually becomes this slaughterhouse killer movie about a dancing ballerina who's a vampire. It's crazy. I didn't have that on my bingo card for movies in 2024 about a killer ballerina vampire, but here we are. And I think it's a great addition to this crazy and creepy little girls canon of horror films that we're getting lately. You know,
yeah.
films like Orphan and Megan,
Hmm.
pretty much any exorcism movie you can
True.
place this alongside. And now this, it's a really great addition. And that's because you get these really, really wonderful performances from the entire cast. Everybody has really good chemistry with each other. They're not huge names. These are faces that you'll probably recognize, but they're not movie stars per se. But everybody works together so well, and they execute upon their roles so well. And I definitely have to call out Alicia Ware, who holds her own completely against this group of adults essentially that she's
Hmm.
acting against, because her as the villain, she just commands the screen in such a way. There's a giddiness to her performance, but also this sadistic nature to her. But there's also an element where it's like I'm kind of rooting for her. I want her to be the one who's like the last one standing in all of this. It changes and morphs over time, and she has to do so much and convey so many emotions. I thought she was absolutely amazing. I think Melissa Barrera, she's just a relatable girl, a
Yeah.
relatable woman who just feels like somebody you would know and feels like somebody who you could speak to and can have a conversation with, but also there's this dark past and history to her characters in both this movie and also in the Scream movies that we
Hmm.
see. But these dark pasts make her really formidable. They make her a worthwhile opponent to whatever threat is out there at play. Everybody else does a really, really tremendous job. I think Kevin Durant was extremely funny in this movie. He's kind of the heavy, the big muscular guy, the big bodybuilder guy, but he's just absolutely hilarious with everything that he delivers. And overall, I think that the physicality as well in this movie is something to point out. It's a really, really physical movie. There's a lot of
Yeah.
physically commanding performances, physical comedy, but also physical horror and physical violence. A lot of that really created and brought to life by Alicia Ware. And then there's stomach churning violence. There's buckets and buckets of blood and
A
gore
lot
and
of
guts
blood.
all over the place. It
Yeah.
becomes quite cartoonish, but it still remains fun. It still has that
Hmm.
fun element to it. And I think that it's great when you can just go into a movie that you know is going to be over the top in a certain respect, but still you can have a great time with it. And ultimately, this is another great addition for this directing pair. And really their entire production company, Radio Silence, also their writing partners. They didn't write this movie, but they work with them quite frequently. They've already assembled a really, really impressive resume of films, and they've kind of taken over the horror genre in a lot of respects. You know, I think with those two Scream films, Ready or Not, and now this, they have carte blanche to kind of do whatever they want. They really are. They have like 3 projects lined up. They're making a sequel to Escape from New York, which is one of my favorite movies.
It's
And now I'm
crazy.
actually excited about that. Like initially
Yeah.
I would be kind of concerned, but seeing what they did with this reimagining of a well-known property, you know, coming from Dracula's Daughter and just reinventing it and making it essentially a complete original film, I thought was great because that original movie, there's not a dancing ballerina that's a vampire. But
Hmm.
it is interesting because Dracula's daughter, she is kind of musical. She can play the piano in that movie, but she's not a ballerina by any stretch, not a dancer by any stretch of the imagination. So I just love what they did with her in this movie. And so, yeah, I think in all likelihood, this is probably one of the more fun and campy vampire movies that you'll see, but
Hmm.
that's a genre and a type of film that I think needs this. I think oftentimes we see Dracula and vampire films, which be they can become a little self-serious. They can be very bogged down by their mythology and just the serious, heavy
Hmm.
nature of them. This one's just like, no, toss all of that out the way, have fun with it, watch bodies fly and hit the floor and blood, buckets of blood just fly everywhere. Just have a great time with it. Don't really think about it all that much. I do want to ask you one thing though, because this movie in the marketing reveals that this is a vampire. This little girl is a
Hmm.
vampire.
Hmm.
And as I was watching the movie, the way that it's framed and constructed makes it appear as if this was supposed to be a surprise reveal in the middle of
Yeah.
the story. Not that
Hmm.
we just automatically come into it assuming and knowing that that was the case. I think that the way it's all constructed, because the main characters have no clue, and they leave breadcrumbs to lead us to that path. And I wonder just along the way if maybe Universal and the producers, they decided like, hey, if we really want people to come and see this, we kind of gotta we got to reveal our biggest hand. We got to show that this is a
Yeah.
vampire essentially, and that this is Dracula's daughter. We can't hide that aspect. And I don't know if that was necessarily the best choice. Maybe it was because it did pretty well at the box office. But a
Hmm.
part of me also kind of wishes that this was like a big, huge reveal in the movie. Like if we were just watching it and we were wondering like, what is this kidnap thriller about? And then we see she's actually a killer vampire ballerina dancer. That would have been like a crazy reveal to
Uh-huh.
experience in the theater. So what did you think about just that, and possibly some of the choices that might have been made, I think, to make us as an audience sort of aware of that, and did that take away at all from the film for you?
Yeah, you know what's so interesting that you say that is watching the movie. I sat there and I was like, it's taking us kind of a while to get to the reveal. You know what I mean? Like of knowing, again, this is all in the marketing. We know exactly who the vampire is, and so I was like, huh, I wonder when they're going to reveal this. Like it literally took like 30 minutes, 35 minutes, or something crazy for them to actually reveal that she was a vampire. And so man, that's so interesting that you say that because part of me thinks I don't know how else you technically get the butts and seats if you don't say that either. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if people just would have went for a trailer where it's like, oh, there's a vampire in the building, but I don't know. But it's not the ballerina little girl. Like I don't know. I really don't know. I think that's a hard thing to kind of think about for me because I agree. I would have rather have just had it be a big reveal. You know what I mean? Even though again, watching the movie, you're like, it's got to be her. It's got to be her. And I was even saying that knowing it was her. I was like, oh man, they have to know it's her. They have to know it's her. So I think there is some things there that's kind of parallels. Like knowing that it's her also kind of helps, but at the same time, I would have loved that reveal if done correctly, if done right. Maybe they would have taken a little more time out to get to that reveal. You know what I mean? Maybe I don't know what they would have done, but I am very curious as well if the marketing was different, how the marketing could have been different to get people in the theater, but also maintain that reveal. I don't know what they could have done, but I think it would have been a welcome change.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think I don't know this, but it felt like that they conceived this to be a surprise. That they
Mm-hmm.
conceived this movie to shoehorn this well-known character, this iconic character into this film without giving it away entirely. And perhaps that was the intention from the get-go. But then once they had the finished movie and it was time to start up the marketing campaign, they probably sat down and said, like, look, there's really not a way to market this movie without giving it away. There's just not enough
Mm-hmm.
there, or there's not a creative or ingenious idea that we have that can actually get people excited to come and see this, because I don't think that a kidnapping movie about this little girl who's a ballerina is necessarily going to do it. That's just not
Right.
enough. You got to really
Exactly.
have the hook there.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there was a way to showcase that she is a vampire ballerina, but how do you hide the Dracula stuff? How do you maybe hold that back and maybe not
Mm-hmm.
give that away, that she's the son of the most famous vampire in literature and
Mm-hmm.
mythology that we've ever known, right? And so maybe there was a way to get there, but I'm not sure. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't necessarily take away from my enjoyment, but I did think about that, and I agree. It did take a while to get to that
Mm-hmm.
place where it's like, oh yeah, now we just can let loose and have fun with
Right.
it. We don't have to, be bogged down in the details and the mystery of it. But be that as it may, it's still a really, really good film, still a super enjoyable film, whether you know what to expect or not. And I can't wait to see what these two do next with their next few projects. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new film Abigail. If you've checked this out, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.